but I'm letting everyone in.
You all are so great.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Everybody. I'm just going to get us on Facebook and then we'll get started. And we'll give a minute for everybody to join us. All right. How's everybody doing today? Camilla is usually the one running the show here, and I don't know where she is right now. So
we were started laughing about it.
That's why we're a couple minutes late. I apologize. But happy to see everybody, and I'm really excited about our guest today. Mary Lou Cobb has been with us a couple times before, and I'm just going to get some information here. So she is the founder and principal of Cobb Education Consulting. She guides educators, caregivers, and professionals of any industry to improve their programs and build communities that work. And before she had her own consulting firm, she was the founder and head of the Cobb School Montessori in Simsbury, Connecticut. She received her Montessori primary diploma and taught for over 30 years before stepping out of the classroom to focus on administration and growing the Cobb School. So, and we were just chatting a little bit, and there you are.
Hi, Camille. Sorry I'm late. How are you, Mary Lou?
I'm well, thank you. We're glad you're all right.
Yes. I'm still settling into I was in the US last week. I'm still settling into my time here. And I forgot that you guys already went back, or you guys already sprung forward. Didn't over here. So I'm thinking it's the usual time.
Right. So,
how is it?
Mary Lou and I were just chatting before, and she's also kind of consulting one-on-one with heads of schools now, knowing that it's kind of lonely at the top, and it's nice to have a sounding board and somebody who's got a lot of experience, just to have as just that as someone to consult with, and when you have questions and problems and things, that might be able to offer some advice from her years of experience as a head. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over, I guess, to you, Camilla. I didn't know if you had anything. I kind of already introduced Mary Lou, but if you have anything else to add before we I know you guys have planned this, so.
That's great. I'm glad you mentioned the consulting, because I met up with Mary Lou earlier this week, and I think that it's a great model. I know we shared her website information on all of the invites for this event, but I'll share it as well in the chat whenever we're towards the end of the meeting, because it's a really great service. It's not like one I've seen before in the Montessori space, so that's great. So today's topic of discussion, I'm sure Camille already mentioned, was to talk about conflicts that happen with families at your school. Most school leaders, they're always, whenever they ask questions in our forum or in our Facebook groups, it's usually about a family that, might raise some difficulties, or might be challenging, or might not yet fully believe in Montessori, and needs a little bit of extra reassurance. And maybe that's what they need some guidance on. So I wanted, we discussed this session to be set up like an interview style, in that we can ask questions and seek guidance from Mary Lou, who's had plenty of experience running a school and dealing with multiple families throughout the years. So please feel free to utilize the chat or unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. I'm just going to start asking questions based off of what we've gathered, and seeing what Mary Lou has to share with us. And hopefully you guys are also welcome to add to the discussion. This is very much a open for participation session. So the first question I want to ask, and this was a question that was asked by one of our members earlier this week, is how can we explain to parents and communicate to them that attendance is really important in Montessori? It seems that this particular head of school is having issues with parents who think that almost attendance might not be mandatory, and then question why their child isn't, keeping up with other classmates or is falling behind. So how to approach that conversation?
Well, this is going to be interesting to talk about. I, over the years, began to see that parents are, of course, individuals, just like their children, but they fall into, to my way of thinking, it's just my opinion, different categories. And one of them is what I call the entitled parent. And by that, I mean parents who feel like they are deserving of special treatment. And the parents who were habitually late at my school, I began to think, I bet they were the ones who were late getting to class in high school. They were the ones who didn't get to school on time. And in general, they were the ones who, quite conceivably, and I don't want to sound harsh about it, but my sense is that, they feel somehow, maybe they were reared to believe that they're better than other people. And I don't know that you personally can change people like that. So I think you have to approach them with clear boundaries. I really do. I think they need to understand what the rules are. So at my school, what I began to see there was no reasoning with a parent like this. That's what I guess I want to say. And so what I ended up doing is we had an assistant at the front desk and a long corridor where it led to the other classrooms. But we made it very clear that arrival was between 8 and 8:15. And late arrivals would have to wait in with the secretary or the assistant receptionist until there was availability. She had availability to walk the children to their classrooms. So again, I knew the approach was, I was at a conference years ago and I remember someone saying, I know how to handle this. I'm going to lock the doors. And that's what she did. And I thought, I can't do that. It didn't feel right to me. I think there are parents who are well-meaning and want to get to school in time, and they have siblings who maybe they wet their pants at the last minute and they can't get everybody together and in the car and to school. So to me, that was a punishment that didn't feel right. However, there were families who were definitely habitually late, and what didn't make sense to them, Camilla, and I couldn't believe it. I could say, when your child is late, it really affects your child and it's an interruption to the class. But what I discovered, and I don't know if anyone else agrees with this, it doesn't seem to stick with those people. So I began to set up a system within the school where the child wasn't punished. Trust me, it's not the child's fault. The child's not driving, but the child may have had to wait just a few minutes and be walked down to the classroom. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Yeah,
Something to share from my school.
Pardon me?
I have something to share in my school. We do it a little differently. We make it our best effort to share with families what's happening during that time that student's missing.
Definitely.
So they understand the educational importance, in addition to having the teacher more than the administrator kind of assess with the parents why there is tardiness. Because some parents, it's a second sibling. And if we even just let them know, we offer morning care where you can bring them earlier and then deal with the secondary student. And I think that sometimes they forget that feature, especially because can't speak for other schools, but our school lists the academic day separate from the extended day.
Yeah. Heather, thank you for bringing that up. And what we also did, definitely talked about what the child was missing and the importance to the community, meaning the classroom community, right? But we also, if the child was consistently late at 5 times, the parents got a call and said, is there anything that we can be, help you get to school in time? Like, we really reached out. And what we discovered is that was a very good tool, not to wait until the first conference in November, but to to sort of have a designated time in which you really, the teacher called, and then I often called as head of school, because it is a very important thing to be on time. Anyhow, I thank you for bringing that up, Heather.
Are there any other comments or questions on in regards to attendance or tardiness when it comes to families at your school? Is anyone else experiencing this? If not, I'll move on to the next question.
I was just going to note that it's really important to document it.
Oh, yes.
Because I know from my experience, what we found is those often were the parents that would come later and say, why isn't my child doing X yet, or whatever, you know, and then if you can kind of say, well, you know, they've missed 10 days in the past 3 months and they've been late, you know, 5 times or whatever, you know, if you can really just have the dates and have it documented, it's really helpful in those situations.
And that needs to be on their report form as well. Whatever conference form you have, I had my teachers start with that to say, just, you know, to be clear, your child has been in school, and they would sometimes challenge it and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not true. I got them here by 8:30 or whatever. But no, actually, this is just wanting to point this out to you, because exactly the reason you're saying. These are the parents that will sometimes say, my child hasn't gotten enough. So they have to look at that accountability.
All right, those are great comments. As here, we have a comment here from Jennifer. Documentation is a weakness of mine, and I know how important it is. If you need support or you need resources, we've got a few documentation resources, including attendance sheets on Thrive. I'm not sure if I think you're a member, Jennifer, so I think you should have access if you need help with documentation. But yeah, it can be tricky, but well worth it, especially to put on your reports. If there are no other comments or questions, or maybe if you think of something later when it comes to tardiness and attendance, please comment in the chat. I'm going to ask the next question, which is, Mary Lou, what would you say, or how would you approach a parent who is always, you know, wanting to come into the classroom, maybe, you know, has difficulty saying goodbye during drop off, and it kind of creates disruption in the morning routines, and you can tell that they want to peek into the classroom and they kind of want to be there. How would you approach that situation?
Well, we had a parent, like we've had many parents, but one in particular, it's interesting, when you asked this question, and she would not own, she had 2 children at our school, very nice person, former teacher, not a Montessori teacher, but she would make it, she would be late. She was one who often was late, but then when she changed that around, she got better. I mean, as we talked to her about the importance of getting the children to school in time, you should know the parents typically don't walk their children in, but she would be one to park and walk them in. She had this need to go to the classroom. First she would take the elementary child and linger for a few minutes, looking around. Is this kind of what you're describing? And then she would find her way to the younger child's class and do the same thing. And then, interestingly enough, go very slowly down the hall and kind of be looking in at each classroom. And it really was, you know, I kept asking myself, she was not a bad person. I don't think any of these parents are ill intent, but I think she was very controlling. She was a parent who I would describe as very anxious. I mean, unusually anxious. And I think really down deep, as I got to know her, and I made a point of trying to get to know her because she frustrated me, to be honest. And I thought, okay, when I get to feeling this way, I need to sort of get to know that person. I mean, married to a chiropractor, had been a teacher, I couldn't put it all together in my mind, but she had a tremendous difficulty in separating from her own 2 children, filled with fear, a lot of fear. And that's what I came to see was a common element with a lot of these families that I was losing sight of in my own frustration. And I don't know, does that happen to you too? But a lot of times the need is driven by fear. And so I made a point with that parent to really engage her. I began to say, I'd love for you to come up after you drop your child. Can you come up in 3 or 4 minutes and have coffee with me? And I broke through that by helping her to feel more confident in our program, to be honest with you. It was a long process. I'm not saying this was an easy thing that anyone can do, but I was determined to try to get through to her. And I think I did, to be honest with you, but she was filled with fear. So it was one of those things where I was able to eventually convince her of the importance of letting go. And that's what it was all about, letting go. That's how I handled it.
I have a, hi, Mary Lou. Sorry, I was eating lunch, but I have a little break here. I have a question, I guess, along the lines of an anxious parent and a parent like that, where they need a little more hand holding when they start. I'm in a particular situation because I'm head of school as well as their child's guide.
Yes.
And now I have the youngest sibling who just started. And in this particular case, everything went fine in the classroom environment, but he's a 3-year-old, and he started home environment room, which is our afternoon after 12. The children who are not in extended day yet, they'll go to the home environment room. And he cried the first day, and because I think it's a difficult transition, but I came in to check, and the girl had him on his lap and rubbing his back and doing what we would do to comfort him. And then I think close to dismissal time, I think she told him she was reading a book, and she said, we don't touch the shelves right now, or come this way. And he got very upset. And the dad basically pulled him out when he heard this. He pulled him out from the home environment room because he thought that the first day should be flexible and his child should be able to touch whatever he would like. So I've been dealing with this situation. This is very recent. And I think I spoke to both parents, but it is a little bit along the lines as well as the entitled parent, that they would like their rules to be different. And the situation I find myself in is that it becomes, and they have made this known to their children, it's kind of like the only person to be trusted is me, which sends a very scary message to the children. And so I don't know how to handle this situation, because if you have any suggestions as or what I'm able to tell them. I'm concerned for the children, really, because it's not, I can't imagine how anxious he's feeling, the 3-year-old, feeling, and they would like his older sister to kind of, if he cries, to come and comfort him. So she has that burden on top of her shoulders, which is, not right again, but.
And so, can I ask you, for that little boy, the first day that he was there, do you think that the guide handled it well? You weren't the person doing that, right? It was somebody else?
No, I was the guide in the classroom environment. However, in the home environment room,
Yes.
what I would have done, but that's me, I would have just allowed him to maybe have the puzzle, or so, and I did speak to the person in the home environment room and say, sometimes we have to be a little bit flexible, especially when somebody is transitioning into this environment. Yeah. But the dad immediately says, he's not coming back. I want his things. And it's just like, doesn't allow for a second chance.
Right. So Dolores, the reason I asked you that is, to be honest, I was thinking, I think I would have allowed that little one, on the first day, I would have granted a little more flexibility. So what you were dealing with, and I've had it happen so many times, is down deep. Sometimes a parent would come in and tell me something, And inside myself, I'd sometimes think, I actually agree with the parent, but we know we have to also protect our teachers. And Lord knows in today's world, we really have to do a lot to protect our teachers. But I do think, and tell me if you would, how this sounds to you, I have known there have been times where I would say to a parent, I'm sorry that, I would get them, first of all, listen to them, active listening. I'd be very present to them and get them to, I'd mirror what they'd say. I think I hear you saying that you wished that the teacher had been more flexible, and really, in a way, empathize. This is what you're doing. You're not condoning or saying that what the teacher did was wrong, but you're really listening in such a way that you can say, I'm sorry that this felt, and like it was too harsh for your child. I really am, and I'm going to look into it. And I think you can do that in a very courteous way. I guess what I'm saying is I think we have to be careful sometimes. When we make a mistake, we can own it if we think it's the right moment to own it. That's a whole broad topic. But I think active listening to that family would be enormously important, and letting them know how you really have heard their concerns. That's what they need, is to, if that resonates with you. Again, you know the family better than I, they have a relationship with you. You want to protect the teacher, there is no doubt. So you're kind of walking a fine line. But I think your best tool for this is using an active listening approach. And really what you're trying to do is let them know that they've been heard. And you're seeking, Stephen Covey, who wrote the book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, had said, the first principle is seek to understand. So it's trying, when parents feel like they can't be heard, when any of us feel like we can't be heard, we can come across as very gruff, rough, and difficult. But I think if they felt heard, it tones it down, calms it down. And I think the key for me is I came to see over the years, and I wonder if you all agree, parents desperately down deep want to know that you love their child as much as they do. And unfortunately, I believe that right now what you're all dealing with really do. I mean, I saw anxiety in parents. There's no doubt. And over the many years I ran a school, but it is at a crisis point right now. You're dealing with highly anxious parents. And why? We're coming out, well, we hope we're coming out of a pandemic. We actually don't know if we are yet. We've been living through a pandemic. There's a war going on. Now, parents might not talk about it, but there are financial concerns that they have. And they expect a lot of us in our schools because they're paying money in many instances. And even if they're not, they expect it because it's a right in America. So there are all these things, but you can assume they're very anxious. That's the first thing you need to know about the parents you're dealing with. And so I think it begs of us in a way to go the extra mile sometimes, but not with the ones who are abusive. Anyhow, I'm talking too much. Did I help you with that a little bit?
Yes, thank you. That's great. Thank you.
You're so welcome. It's a tough one.
Does anyone else have any similar situations or stories, or just wants to ask a question about a conflict with a family that they might be dealing with? I want to open it up. I don't want to ask all the questions. If not, I have a couple prepared, but just want to see. Oh, I see a hand raised.
Hello, everyone. I would like to ask Mary about how to keep balance between telling parents that I understand you and between protecting your teachers, because there are many situations that can happen like this, and how to keep that balance.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a challenge. You brought up a huge challenge we have right now. I think we can do a lot when we have parents come. Are you in a private school or a public school? Can I ask you that?
In a private school.
Private school. I think we have to really look at, Montessori says, prepare the environment. Well, part of that to me is preparing our written materials, throughout the interview process, the admissions process. I think we have to really do a better job at describing who it is that we are, what we stand for, what Montessori is. And I think that, again, right through when a parent enters the school, I think it behooves us now to be very clear with them. And in our faculty parent handbook and the contract, for example. And I think we can talk about grace and courtesy, for example. What does that mean? You know, we're living in a society that, by the way, your teachers and all of you are dealing with the digital age, which is shocking. I mean, think about how things have changed in our culture since Maria Montessori started her program. And I think our children aren't as settled because they're distracted by these technological devices that they're walking around in, and so are we. I'm not just blaming the children here, but I think we should really be clear about who it is we are in our written material, and so that we can hopefully avoid the conflicts. I guess that's what I'm wanting to say, or at least be able to refer to our principles, our core principles. And I think part of the conflict that I see that's going on, and I would love to know if you agree with me, disagree with me, but you know, when we're trained as Montessori teachers, we are trained to really transform ourselves. We talk about the spiritual preparation of the teacher. So we're there as not in a much deeper way. We're not there running a play school. We're running a program that is based on a deep philosophy of life that talks about the transformation of the human being. And then we are living in a society that is in conflict really with everything that we stand for, I think. I think that's part of our problem. Our culture isn't, I mean, I love being an alternative to our culture because our culture is not so gracious anymore. And I think you're seeing a lot of our families fall from grace. They're intense, they're difficult. And so I think when I think about the prepared environment, we have to prepare ourselves for this world that we're living in now. And we have to help our teachers stay in that place of knowing what they stand for, why they're doing this work, why we are doing this work, so that we can have the balance that you're talking about. And that requires that they be courageous and strong and committed and confident in their belief about Montessori. And that's where I think that you could handle the more sort of 5%ers, as they're known, the sort of aggressive parents. I don't know if I'm answering your question, but does that make sense to you a little bit?
Yes, thank you, Mary.
You're so welcome. Yes,
I see another hand here from Jennifer. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Jennifer. First off, I just want to say how incredibly helpful this is. I am a new admissions director at a private Montessori school, and I took over in December from a quick succession of 2 other admissions directors. So we are in the process of trying to stabilize. I also have been a parent at the school for 10 years, and one of my children has gone through the program already. The other one is still in the program. My question is about on the admissions front. I have inherited some families that we don't have good documentation on, who were put in a wait list. And I'm not sure why the families were waitlisted. However, we did have a family visit with the parent and the child, and the anxiety level of both the parent and the child was so high that despite them still being interested in our school, I don't think they will be a good fit. However, I don't have any guidance in how to tell a family that they're not a good fit. In the past, our experience has been, we put you on the wait list, you're a wonderful person, perhaps we'll get back to you. But at that point, usually people have moved on. This family has consistently for the last year been interested. So I guess I'm asking for the firm, gracious, courteous way to explain to the family.
Well, I think it's true. It's a slippery slope. And I say that the reason being, you know, to be honest, I avoided the conflict as much as possible. And what I would often do and I did a lot of the admissions myself, when I founded the school and was growing the school, I discovered that, again, parents are very sensitive about their children. And when they're told their child isn't a good fit, it is a form of rejection. And rejection is really painful. Think about it. I mean, if we were told we aren't a good fit, it's pretty devastating. So to be honest, couple of things I did, and I'm sure you do this, but I would always, even though I was often the only person interviewing the child, to be honest, I referred to the admissions team, and I did that for a reason. It's really important that it not be on your shoulders alone. Okay, and I say that because I was stalked by someone once because I did something and I didn't take his child. In that case, I had recommended that his child, who was 2.5, that we wait and he enter the primary program when he was 3. That was all I was recommending into the second semester. And the father was outraged and considered that I somehow was biased against his child. So it was a very scary time for me. I mean, I had to call the police and all that sort of thing because I realized that every evening as I left the school, which I tended to do late, as I bet many of you do, there was a car hiding behind the tree. I mean, it was something I didn't realize right away. So it taught me a lot about the sensitivity, let's say, of some parents. And so what I always spoke about when people came in to visit the school was that the process of determining who comes into a classroom and into the school is very complicated. It's very lengthy, and it's like a big puzzle. I often refer to it as a big puzzle because one of the great things that Maria Montessori discovered is the beauty of having mixed ages within a classroom. This is where we're quite unique from other schools, right? So we have a 3 to 4 year age span in each class. And it's very important in our admissions work to have a third, and a third, if you will, a third of 3s, a third of 4s, a third of 5 and 6s, for example. And you can carry that out in your elementary program as well. So you're not really talking about gender anymore, because you can't. You know, there was a time when I would say, I'm looking to seek to balance the girls to boys. And I now that's something that I would not recommend that you say for obvious reasons. But I think, again, you can just say, we only have a certain number of openings every year. And first place goes to students who are currently enrolled. So once we get our re-enrollment contracts back, we will determine who on our wait list is, going to be able to come in, and that will be according to ages. So 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, for example. And so if someone says, why didn't my child get, well, there's no room, unfortunately, for your 5-year-old. It saves you from saying your child isn't a good fit.
That is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. And
well,
the fact
I learned the hard way. I mean, I have some war stories that you wouldn't believe. I mean, seriously, where I thought, wow, my life was threatened over somebody once who literally threatened me.
So the fact that you're still here doing a webinar all those years later means that you do show a huge commitment to Montessori. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Well, good luck. I mean, I know that it's the rare person who does that, by the way. I want to emphasize that. But anyhow.
Thank you.
Thank you for the question.
Does anybody else have any questions about parent conflicts or any issues they'd like to ask? If not, I'm happy to ask a question. I want to pause and kind of take a few steps back to special exceptions, because I see this issue coming up a lot, whether it's, when it comes to food. I know a lot of Montessori schools, they have certain food policies, but parents sometimes want special exceptions. Or when it comes to even like tuition rates, or, oh, can my child come in only this many times a week because we work on this day and it's not convenient to us. Just a whole topic of exceptions. So what would you say, or how would you communicate to a family who's just constantly looking for that special treatment? And it's obviously just, it makes things unfair for the other families.
It does. And I've used, I've actually referred to it as in the fairness for all, we do the following. I mean, these are families, again, I refer to them as people who might have grown up as children being told that they were special. And, I don't think we're going to change their minds about that, but they're not really thinking of other people. And so this is where we, I believe, have to be clear with what our rules and expectations are. And again, that's in our handbook, etc. We can refer to them. So you have to do that groundwork first and have those things spelled out. But if it's a persistent thing, one of the things I'd say is be careful that the teachers aren't burdened too much with this. Teachers are really, as you all know, they're struggling, they're burning out. There's a lot that they're, not that you're not. I mean, I totally sympathize with each and every one of you right now. I think what you've been doing, and I really mean this, it's tough work. It's really tough work. But I'm wanting to remind you that this has been a really hard period for parents. So you as school leaders are in a very interesting position from my perspective. You have to care for your teachers. You really do. And I almost feel like teachers need a workshop on how to handle difficult parents like the one you're describing. They need some fuel. When they're trained, no one is really telling them, to my knowledge, in training centers, how do you deal with that kind of parent who wants special treatment? And I think therefore I got to the point where I said to my teachers when I had to leave the classroom just to run the school full time, I said, if you have a parent like that, I want you to come and get me. I want to join you in your conferences because it's not fair to you. I don't know. I think that's one kind of parent that is really hard, but I think there are others. Would you like to hear my categories of parents that, I mean, it's just my own opinion, but, believe me, I try to be non-judgmental. I try to check my biases and all the rest of it. But over the years, I came to see that the kind of parent that would drive me crazy, if you will, most of them, I want to really jump in and say, were wonderful. Most of them wanted to come into the school and partner with me on behalf of their child, right? But those were the 95%ers, as Rob Evans and Michael Thompson would say. How many of you all are familiar with their work? Michael Thompson, do you know who I'm talking about? Oh, well, they're fabulous. These are two gentlemen who I believe they were, I don't know, Camilla might know this. They were working at the Milton School in Massachusetts. And they have had years of experience of working with independent school parents. And they have a book that's called Hopes and Fears, Working with Today's Independent School Parents. And they're really wonderful. And basically what their book does is talk about the tensions, the rising tensions and anxieties that it's inevitable. We're not going to have a perfect situation with parents, but the anxiety is out of control. And part of that is this year, in the last 2 years, and think about all the changes you've had to deal with and all this regulations, state regulations, things to do with COVID and on and on. Thank you, come on. So the parents are really nervous. And so that's the given you have to know, right? And they say that parents fall into two categories, and I agree with them. And by the way, when Rob Evans first kind of started speaking, I had him to my school maybe 30 years ago, so we're old friends. But he said, you have the 95%ers who are basically pretty good people, really, I don't mean to define it as good, but they want to work with you. They're reasonable. Then you have the 5% who are not so much, but with your toolkit is such that with the 95%ers, remember the importance of active listening. So your average parent who comes in with things, you need to sort of stop and be available to them, be present to them, listen to them, listen to learn what it is that they really want to say. Observe them, a Montessori principle, observe their body language. So not just what is said, but is what is not said. Remember, there are 4 stages to active listening. That's a whole workshop I give, but the first one is mirroring, when a parent tells you something and you say, I believe I hear you saying, blah, 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 whatever it is. Another second stage would be empathizing. Oh, it really upset you when so-and-so did such and such. I understand. Validating. Yes, it was unfortunate that your child was last in line or whatever it was. And then summarizing. I think what your issue is today is. So there are 4 stages, and the important part of active listening is it's exactly what it says. You are not passive. You are listening intently and intensely to be there and to hear and learn from that person. They are also recommending in the book to ask questions about their hopes and fears. What do you want to see for the future of your child? In other words, just as you know in Montessori, our role is to know each and every child well so that we can serve their needs. We need, I believe, as well as Rob and Michael Thompson, we need to know the parents well. I believed, my goal was to also get to know the siblings and the dogs, the family or the cats. In other words, who are these people? They're not just numbers to us. So the more we put ourselves out to know, truly know and appreciate them, I think the better the relationship will go. Know the child. Don't sugarcoat things that you have to say to them. You can, according to Rob and Michael, it's important. Parents know when you're jerking them around. You can be honest and straightforward as long as you have developed, if you will, in advance, that really authentic relationship that I'm talking about. But I think today our focus is more on the 5%ers. Those are the 95%. They're the easy ones to deal with, if you will. But Rob and Mike say that there are 3 types. They say anxious and incompetent types, unresponsive, and intimidators. And honestly, I told them I classified them a little more differently than that. There are some similarities. And mine, the ones that would take a lot of my time, let's put it that way, were, I called them the hand wringers, the worrywarts. More often than not, the moms, not always, sometimes the dads as well, but the ones who were really just, do you think they're safe being outside when the sun is out too long? Or do you think, I had a parent once who was a wreck about not wanting her children to play in the backyard, the playground, because she said there'd be flying ticks. I mean, things that I wouldn't think a parent would be thinking in their head. I'm thinking, do ticks fly? I don't think ticks fly. And by the way, we believe in physical education and that children need to go outside. And I talked about the importance of the outdoor environment, but she was always a wreck about the food, a wreck about everything. So these were she was a hand wringer. And knowing that, it helped me in a way to say she's coming from fear. She's a very frightened person. And part of it is she lacked thinking many, talking about one person, but the truth is these kinds of parents tend to be insecure about themselves and their own parenting skills. That's what I came to see. So you have hand wringers and you have controllers, and the controllers are the ones who come in and tell you, I was a nurse for many years and I've been retired, but I don't like the way you're handling this COVID situation. So let me tell you how I think you should do it. Does that sound familiar? If you, that kind of parent who comes in and you just want to go, I've got this. I know how to run the school. I don't need her to tell me what to do anymore. They can seriously drive you crazy. Again, often they come from fear. They don't let go easily. And then we talked earlier about the entitled, right? The one who feels like they need the special attention. And to my way of thinking, I worry that they were born with a silver spoon in their mouth. And I want to say, you know what? Everybody here is treated in a fair way. This is how we do things. And you have to have very, very clear boundaries with those people. Then you have the doubting Thomases, and the doubting Thomases I gave a name for. Again, this is just my opinion, you all, are the people who are always wanting proof. I don't know if you've met those people they want the data. Does Montessori work? And I'm going, I learned with those people that there was a time in the early days in the 60s and 70s, 80s, we used to be able to say, you need to trust the program. There's no way a doubting Thomas is going to trust what I have to say about that. In fact, I had a parent once, and he was wonderful, but he said to me, when his daughter got up and gave her little graduation speech, which we did at our school, he goes, on the day she graduated, and this was in 6th grade, he said, oh my goodness, now I get it. And I wanted to think it took all that time. But when he saw her confidence, when he saw that she could get up and give a gorgeous speech and talk about the meaning of Montessori in her life, it transformed him. So I think doubting Thomases, they rely on the data. And the best approach for them, I have found, is bringing in alums to speak, really, in alumni families. And then you have the dreaded intimidators. And the intimidators are nothing more than bullies, in my opinion. And I say that strongly because I have to say you cannot reason with an intimidator. And my recommendation to you is, if you are suddenly in a situation where someone comes in yelling at you, or your teacher, my advice to you is to stand up and say, actually, we're not going to meet today. This meeting is over. Because you can't reason with someone who's in that irrational state. And it's important that we maintain the balance in our lives, and we have to take care of ourselves. And an intimidator has to be checked. They have to, just like a child, in a sense, in my opinion, that we should not tolerate an intimidator attacking us. That's where we need to be extremely strong. And that's where I came up with the 3 C's. I think that we need to be confident in ourselves, competent, we know what we're doing, and we have to have courage. This work is not for the faint of heart. It really is not. It is hard work, but it is noble work. It is important work. And with everything that's happening in the world today, I can't think of a more important job than what you have. So that's just my opinion of parents. I loved my parents. But I was often sometimes really surprised, and I don't know if this has happened to you, where suddenly, if you will, someone fell from grace, as I like to call it, someone who didn't seem to have the characteristics of an intimidator or some such thing, or someone who was so entitled suddenly appear that way. And that used to throw me more than anything. And then I was reminded over the years, I'd come to see that sometimes there is something else going on in that person's life, and we don't know what that is. And so we have to, in a way, have tougher skin and know that some of this is not something we should personalize. It's, for me, that was a rough lesson. I don't do well with, I avoid conflict. That's sort of obvious. And I am about nurturing peacemakers. So to me, it goes against everything as to who I am. But what I learned over the years was to say, there are times when enough is enough. And whether it was, for example, I had a family, a man and his wife, and they came to see one of my teachers, and the man was so rude to the teacher. He obviously didn't like her, and he attacked her. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I'm very short, by the way. And I remember he was very tall. I mean, it was just this strange, two of us standing there were strange. But anyhow, I stood up and said, the meeting's over. You need to leave the school now. Now, by the way, he withdrew his child. He was insulted that I would dare to talk to him that way. But I think it was one of the more important things that I did. It was important that I not allow somebody to be abusive to another teacher. And I learned that, we were better off not to have that kind of person. Does that sound too harsh? But it wasn't helpful to our community. Anyhow.
On the topic of parents who you consider to be intimidators, how do you deal when that intimidating parent is teaching their child that same value of being intimidating to get their way under the guise of, quote unquote, raising her to be a strong woman?
Oh, I've heard that. I've also heard it for, it's interesting you bring it up. I remember years ago, I had a very difficult little boy, and I could not get through to the parent. And I began to see, in a way, and I think, Heather, this is what you're talking about, the parent was secretly proud that the child was so aggressive. Is that what you're talking about? That down deep, they wanted that child. They want the child, in a way, to be like themselves, there was no way I could get through to that family, but the truth of the matter was I could get through to the child. And that's what we did. We were able to get through to this, happened to be a boy, not a girl, but I know exactly the kind of profile you're describing. And they don't like it when you discipline the child, but it's important that you do it for the sake of the other children. Again, it's hard because we seek a right to have a win-win with our families. I mean, I always felt that was the best approach, but sometimes people aren't consciously aware of what they're doing. And I absolutely get it. They want I totally get it. They want their little girl to grow up and be strong. Again, it suggests to me that there's some kind of fear going on here that we are not aware of, or that this particular mother may have really had to work extremely hard to achieve what she's achieved now. So she needs some recognition. She, the mother, needs some recognition in some way that you can give it, whether she does something for the school, you involve her in some way. That's how another technique I've used is to recognize, how can I meet this unmet need that this person has? So I know that sounds strange, but I'm thinking of a couple of people I've had to deal with, but I'm very familiar with that profile. But again, I think you take the child and you have to make it very clear. And fortunately, we have been able to reach children better than sometimes the parents.
Did that help, Heather?
Say yes. The biggest issue is just, we know the mom's aggressive and her goal is to intimidate.
Yeah.
She definitely likes to call and scream and suddenly hang up when she doesn't get her way. And it's just creating that conflict in the classroom where if a student who her child doesn't want to sit with sits near them, she intentionally knocks over their lesson material. Or if she doesn't want to sit near them at recess, she shoves them down and screams that she hates them. And the problem is this mom, who is best classified in my mind more a bully than an intimidator, because I'm not intimidated by her. She can yell all she would like. She's not correct. She's just kind of intentionally raising a bully. But if her child goes home and says that they got in trouble, it doesn't come back in a way that's workable for us, because we don't allow that behavior here.
Right. Yeah, you've got a tough one, Heather. And you may have to decide in your minds whether this is a family you want to keep, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't think there's only so much we can do unless we have cooperation from the parents. And you can't have a child doing that in the classroom. And if the parent isn't going to support it, and in fact, if the parent's going to sabotage it, then I think that's another whole situation. And I don't know, not that I'm about kicking children out, but I think that limits have to be understood. And as we know, no child has the right to interfere with another. Their limits end with the freedom of other children. I mean, Montessori wrote extensively about this. So it makes me wonder if this is a good parent for you. Do you think that way or not? She
was actually enrolled by a a director who stayed with us less than 6 months.
Mm.
And despite only having met that director one time, this parent only met her one time for enrollment. She worships the ground she walked on, has made more than one comment about how that person was better at the job than I was, despite my knowledge of behind the scenes behaviors. But luckily I don't have to worry about them coming back. Just the mom had a fit because I wouldn't say I wouldn't. I made sure she was aware when she complained about something that we're not changing policy to appease her as it's policy that's been set in place. And she let me know they would not be returning it and then hung up on me promptly. So at this point, it's more getting to June without that child detrimentally hindering anyone else in the classroom.
Wow. I think you're lucky, in a way, blessed that this person's going to leave, because she obviously has her mind made up as to what she wants, who she is and what she wants. She's not going to help you with this child at all. But I would be very firm that remember, the child like this who is undisciplined in a way and who's struggling like this is really an unhappy child. That's what the mother fails to see. That's a whole nother topic. This is not a happy child. The mother is not supporting the school's approach either, and it's not beneficial to the other children. So hang in there. I think you're doing the right thing.
Thank you, Mary Lou. We have another question here from Andrew, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah. I have another question about parent involvement into school community. And in my experience, sometimes it happens that these pretty good people come into your events for community, and we become part of the school community, and we become active helpers. Yes. And one day we are the ones who are yelling at you. And personally for me, it is really hard to give that trust in people after these accidents. And you start to, I don't know, avoid that honest and authentical relation with other parents, just to be aware of these situations and to have that distance, not to get hurt as a person. So maybe can you suggest I don't know, possibilities for parent involvement into school community, that the parents won't feel that they are, I don't know, controllers, or we can advise you how to run a school after all, or we have very good advices. And also another question is how to help yourself after these situations with parents, because how to get, I don't know, emotional stability after this.
Yeah, I hear you. Very good question. I mean, you know, when your trust is broken, it's a very bad feeling. And as I said, one of the things I own in myself is when suddenly somebody turns on you that you least expect, right? You really are like, whoa, where did that come from? I usually went into that place of, what did I do wrong? Self-blame. And I learned over the years, well, it wasn't anything I did. Actually, if I did, I owned that. As I said, I think I want to ask forgiveness if I do something wrong. But if I didn't, I had to learn to, in a way, toughen up a little bit and to say that this sometimes isn't personal. Some people are, believe it or not, totally unaware that they're doing this. That's the shocking part to me. And I learned another kind of quality in a person. I had a parent once and I couldn't get over it. Actually, I've had more than one. They kind of don't feel alive unless they create a lot of chaos. Like there's always something going on in their lives. And I used to get wrapped up in all of that. I get swept away with them. And then I came to see that that made them somehow feel alive, and I was being sucked into it. And one has to be very careful of that. But a couple of things. It took me a long time to really start a parent association. And most schools have them. And I'm probably, the Cobb School is one of the last to have one because of exactly what you just said. I was concerned about how the parents would, compete with one another. What I saw sometimes, it was a competition that took on. Anyhow, we did start it, but what I did was to create a volunteer handbook. You can't fire volunteers, and that was part of my dilemma. Not that I'm about firing people, but if you have parents who've gone over the edge out of anxiety or whatever, it's really hard to say to them, I'd rather you not do this anymore. So I avoided it for years. But when I finally did create a parent association, it was with a manual that I put together first, and I sat with my administrative team, and we really spelled out, what does the parent association do? What is the purpose? And, for example, we made it very clear that if they did a fundraiser like a bake sale, that ultimately the money would be spent, whatever they raised. They didn't make the decision as to how it would be spent. They only got to raise the money. Because what I discovered is that parents will do this sort of wonderful work and then say, but you better go and buy this. And I'm thinking, well, that's not actually what we need the money for. So we spelled out clearly what the role was. And we often said to them, you're like ambassadors. I would talk to them. You're my ambassadors. You're going to help me do activities that will bring joy into our community. And so I centered it around things like bake sales and things like that. But it gave them the involvement that they needed and that we also appreciated. I don't want to not say we didn't, we did. But I also discovered, for whatever it's worth, sometimes the parents who did do that, as kind-hearted as they were the ones who most wanted to be in the classrooms. So they were the ones who were going into the gym or parent room to do the things that they were doing, but it gave them more access to the children. And I wasn't about separating them from the children, but I came to see they were the ones who let go the last of their children. They didn't see the importance of the independence of the children. So it's a long way of saying to you, I think if you do whatever you do with parents, you've got to have clarity. You've got to have a manual that spells out, this is what the school does, this is what you do. Here is the responsibility of a board. Here's, that's a whole other topic, but it's the same sort of thing. There's the operation of the school, which is run by you and your team and your faculty, right? And then they're volunteers who can support you, but you spell it out, you talk to them in advance so that there is no lack of understanding. I think it's just really, really important to do that. Now, after you've had the wind knocked out of your sails, as you've described, I can't say enough about the fact that I think you have to practice self-care. And one reason why I'm now meeting with so many heads of schools is sometimes you just need a friend, a mentor, somebody you can meet one-on-one, which is what I'm doing a lot, just to bounce off ideas or sometimes cry a little because it's so lonely at the top. Unfortunately, in your positions, you can't turn and say, God, I'm feeling sad. That really hurt my feelings. But that's what you're feeling. How do so turn to a friend, call me, whatever it is, get the support you need and take care of yourself. I took up singing in a choir because I love to sing. I certainly wasn't going to become a rock and roller or anything like that. So I decided to take up singing, and I rescued dogs. And I found that I needed the balance of doing those things to keep myself together. Otherwise, you'll get sick. You really will. It's a hard job. But it can also be one of the most rewarding things you've ever done. At least for me, it was.
Thank you, Mary Lou. I'm going to go ahead and drop Mary Lou's email in the chat as well, if anybody wants to, because I know Camille shared her website earlier. But if anybody wants to contact her and ask her questions, as she mentioned, she's doing her one-on-ones. And if you are really looking for a mentor in the Montessori leadership space, to please get in contact with her. If you think of any other questions, like I said, please just feel free to email Mary Lou, and I'm sure she'll be happy to set up a meeting with you. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. It's been a really amazing hour. I feel like every time Mary Lou comes on our calls, we all learn so much from her experience and wisdom. So it really means a lot. We look forward to seeing you at next week's town hall. It'll be at the same time. It's the same registration link. And yes, thank you all for joining, and thank you, Mary Lou.
Well, thank you. And I really mean it. Hang in there, you all. You're doing the toughest work right now, because I'm in with so many people right now with through whole school leadership and so on. I'm hearing just war stories. You're in the trenches and it's really hard. So it's lovely that you all have this forum, really, because you need to support each other. And I'm out there cheering for you. Thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you. You're getting a lot of lovely messages in the chat. A lot of thank yous. All right, everybody, have a great Thursday, and hopefully a great weekend as well.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.